From the time we were little children, my brother Orville and myself lived together, played together, worked together, and in fact, thought together. Wilbur Wright. By 1908, the Wright brothers were the most famous men in the world. Bicycle mechanics with little money and no college education, by trial and error, somehow figured out powered flight, controlled by onboard humans. From humble origins in Dayton, Ohio, the Wright family lived at 7 Hawthorne Street for 42 years. Their parents, Milton and Susan Wright, taught their children strong family values and encouraged their kids to learn. We were lucky enough to grow up where there was always much encouragement to children. In a different kind of environment, our curiosity might have been nipped in the bud long before it could have borne fruit. Orville Wright. And when their father brought home a toy rubber band powered helicopter, Wilbur and Orville's imagination soared. The world would never be the same. Welcome to the neighborhood in downtown Dayton, Ohio, where the Wright brothers grew up, here on Hawthorne Street. Great picture of both on the back porch. This is where the back porch used to be. They have a foundation that goes around that shows you where the house once was. Henry Ford moved it in 1936 to save it, moved it to Greenfield Village, but this is where Orville and Wilbur Wright, those ideas for controlled, powered man flight, they were all born here in this space. Wilbur Wright, in fact, died in the home in 1912. Wilbur Wright was exceptionally brilliant, as was his younger brother Orville. Wilbur was actually headed off to Yale University when at 18 years old, he got hit in the mouth with a hockey stick and it knocked out all his front teeth, and he became a recluse and wouldn't come out of the house for 2 years. It was in this space. What did he do for that 2 years? He studied the possibility of controlled powered man flight. So if he doesn't get hit in the mouth with a hockey stick, he's off to Yale University and someone else invents airplanes, if ever, who knows. They spent 4 years at Kitty Hawk on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Their first glider left behind in care of the Tate family. Mrs. Tate used the cloth from the wings to sew dresses for her 2 children. After 3 years of gliding, during which they came up with their own mathematical equations for lift, it was time to mount a motor and take off. And on December 17, 1903, Orville Wright lifted off for 12 seconds, 120 feet. The world's first pilot was born. In 1904 and 05, the brothers perfected controlled powered flight, turning figure eights in the air at Huffman Prairie, just northeast of Dayton. From their first motorized flight at Kitty Hawk, it would be 5 years before the world ever believed them. Well, there it is, the world's first practical flying machine. They called them airplanes later. The Wright 3 Flyer that flew a record 24.2 miles at Huffman Prairie in 1905, just northeast of Dayton. Wilbur and Orville Wright used this 1898 Singer sewing machine to sew the fabric on their early flying machines. According to the family history, Wilbur ran the machine while Orville marked and cut the cloth spread out on the floor of the Wright family home at 7 Hawthorne Street.
Now, he is in a cradle, and this is where we get the movement where we can do the turns right and left. And he's in a cradle, and that moves back and forth. The other thing you can just make out, it looks like a string going over his head. That would cut off the gas supply. The black engine there that looks heavy, like a heavy engine, was really a camouflage. Because at this time we've got a whole bunch of people all competing to get up in the air, and so they wanted it to look like it was very heavy. It's very lightweight aluminum.
How about a shout out to Charlie Taylor, who ran the bicycle shop while the Wright brothers were off experimenting at Kitty Hawk. If not for Charlie Taylor, who built this really cool aluminum engine, the Wright brothers may have never got off the ground.
Oh, the metal poles that you see coming down there, they are not metal poles, they're very lightweight wood. Again, this was a camouflage so that if people were watching them, they would think that, oh my goodness, they had these heavy metal rods coming down, but it was really lightweight. So it was just to prevent other people from stealing their ideas.
The Wright brothers were so ahead of their time, they invented as they went along. Their idea of wing warping, bending of the wings to help it get off the ground. Wilbur invented the air prop or propeller. They built their engines, they laid next to, and hope that chain doesn't break over Wilbur as he flies over Huffman Prairie. Check out that rudder on the back. This is just incredible, as were the Wright brothers. The Wright 3 flyer is important for a lot of reasons. Certainly to Orville Wright, who wanted this Wright 3 flyer to come back here and live in Dayton, Ohio. This was a plane that was controlled, where they could go out and do circles and banks and figure eights. A lot of the pieces and parts to this original aircraft spread out over the decades, people just taking them, but word got out that they wanted to rebuild it, and Orville was instrumental in that project, and a lot of those parts that came back were used in the reconstruction of this aircraft. It's estimated about 85% of this plane is indeed original. It's just fascinating.
The Wright brothers would one day achieve success beyond their wildest dreams. Their one indulgence, their Hawthorne Hill mansion. And you could hop on a tram from Carillon Park and take a tour.
And like from then on, I'm a liar just because of that Wright instance,
Enjoyed my little shuttle ride over to Hawthorne Hill. Let's check it out. Hawthorne Hill, the home of Orville Wright, his father Milton, younger sister Catherine. Wilbur didn't live here. He had died 2 years prior. They moved in 1914. Charles Lindbergh, Henry Ford, and Thomas Edison were guests of Hawthorne Hill, and now I am too. Welcome to Hawthorne Hill. We're going inside. Beautiful.
So as we walk around today in these different rooms, we have a number of photographs we can pass out that you can take a closer look at. Starting with this one. This is one of the more famous photographs ever taken of our two hometown heroes, Wilbur and his younger brother Orville. If you're going to build yourself a grand home where you can entertain people, you want to have a reception room. All that open countryside that they owned back this direction. So the Oakwood of 100 years ago was out in the country. It would have been
Orville next to Amelia Earhart.
maybe some of your living rooms at home is where Orville would host big family gatherings. And there were in fact 2 weddings at the house and study. Even though NCR redecorated the rest of the house every so many years to keep it fresh, they always kept his library intact. And so they wanted to use it as sort of a maybe not a shrine to Orville, but like as a reminder or a memorial to him. There was a telephone, a little telephone room, one telephone in the house. I mean, again, this is a modern room. This is the original dining room table. All the chairs that are along the wall are original. The buffet and these sideboards. He's painfully shy. No real recordings of his voice. People were always asking him to give speeches or addresses or remarks. And he would never really do that. He just was very, very quiet, very reserved. It's a trait that he shared with his mother. The kitchen will probably disappoint most of you. It's not very elaborate or grand. So there is the original wall tile behind that stove. And this is all the original cabinetry, even though it's been painted white.
Library from the other side.
That's a great circuit box. Isn't that neat?
Orville's
We put the
shoes.
plexi over because it's still hot. We don't want to
And his chair.
make a wrong move. But no, isn't that beautiful? All the metals and everything. It's
Nice shot of the bishop, Milton Wright, Wilbur and Orville's father, who died in this room, in this bed.
To a visit from a very famous American, Charles Lindbergh. So just a few weeks after Lindbergh had flown solo across the Atlantic, Orville invites him to Dayton, Ohio, where the two of them can meet. That's where this photo is taken, out at Wright Field in Dayton. Well, ahead of time, Lindbergh's handlers told Orville and Orville's friends and folks here in Dayton that there couldn't be any public appearances. They say, well, now wait a minute. We know Lindbergh landed, we know Orville picked him up, and we know where Orville lives. So,
It can't be too hard.
not that, it can't be that hard. So without much, advance warning, Lindbergh and his entourage and Orville are all downstairs. They look outside. They start seeing groups of people walking across the lawn. Orville says, pull the blinds, turn off all the lights, we'll go upstairs. They won't know we're here.
Pretend like you're dead.
Pretend like that, right? Yeah. People start climbing trees. Some of these little trees. So look, it's a true story. To look through the second floor windows, there's stories of some of the Oakland public safety officers having to shoo away news reporters that were literally hiding in the bushes. They're knocking on the windows, ringing the doorbell. Orville's such a quiet and shy person, isn't the kind to go outside and shake a few hands and send people on their way. So he's in a real panic that he pleads with Lindbergh. We got to do something to get rid of this crowd. What can we do? What can we do? And what Lindbergh famously does is step out on this little foot balcony. He waves to the crowd in each direction. He doesn't say a word. He doesn't really make a true public appearance, no speech or anything. But that was enough to satisfy the crowd. And this was very therapeutic for his back and legs.
So this was Orville.
Orville Wright's shower.
Orville Wright's shower, therapeutic for his sciatic in the back after the crash in 1908. His tub, Orville Wright's tub. Pretty cool. Is this got to be Orville's room?
This is his bedroom. This is where we typically end our tour. So we're kind of wrapping up. If you're getting,
No, I'm loving it.
this is his actual mattress and box springs. And other things in here, that the chair is original, that painting on the wall is original. You can kind of imagine him waking up and seeing a painting of the first flight. Over here, this is his original mirror and his chest of drawers. So maybe he's combing his hair, straightening his tie, those kinds of things. I always like to show this to give people an understanding that the man we've been talking about, this famous first flight photo, Orville Wright, is 32 years old when he takes off into history on an aircraft made out of wood and wire and fabric that he and his brother sewed on the family sewing machine. Well, you fast forward in his life, he lives here until he's 76 years old, and while he's 76 years old, Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier in the Bell X-1 rocket plane. So less than 44 years between this and this. You're going 700 miles per hour in this, and this can last 120 feet in 12 seconds. It's just kind of amazing. And when they go through Orville Wright's wallet, they were surprised to only find one photograph in his wallet. Anybody want to guess what it was?
Dog.
Man, I knew you were going to. Of course, Jan. It was. Now, here's a man. Listen, a man. But there's a kicker. There's a kicker to it. You're exactly right. I knew somebody would get this. So here's a man that never married, had no children, had no close person. Had very few close personal friends. Only had a photo of his dog when he was a puppy. And the kicker is, the dog had died over 25 years before Orville died. So he had that photo in his wallet for 25 years.
So did he have another dog?
Never owned another dog. It really was man's best friend.
Orville Wright, the world's first airplane pilot. His mirror, dresser, and original bed in Orville Wright's room on Hawthorne Hill. Thank you so much. That was a great tour. Hawthorne Hill lives. Thanks, Caroline Park. Great tour.
Corporator demand. You'd think that in a given year, especially in cold weather months.
It's a nice neighborhood.
Oh, this is Oakland.
Oh, I've never been here, so
Yeah, that's
it's. I was
You're not going to get any nicer.
okay.
around
I was gonna
this
say
area.
'cause it's definitely nicer than the hood I grew up in.
Here's that house.
Is this the most affluent section of Dayton then?
Yeah.
Sorta, kinda.
Certainly in terms of her a square mile or anything, absolutely.
So I'm the geeky guy with my cell phone camera here at the Dayton Aviation Heritage National Historic Park. And I run into this guy. You tell me your name?
My name is Doug Knopf.
And you do what across the street?
I am the creative director and partner of the Wright Brothers USA, which is across the street there.
On West 3rd Street?
On West 3rd.
And what is it you do? You said you license
We
the name of the Wright
license
Brothers?
the name and trademark of the Wright Brothers on merchandise and services.
Wow, and I suppose there's still a pretty big market for that, yes?
We're new. We've been in business for about 5 years, and the family did not license the name for over 100 years, so this is relatively new. We're building a brand. It's going to take time, but it's truly an honor to work with the Wright Brothers Family Foundation. So licensing deals or products that we sell, a royalty from those go to the family so that we can support their cause of keeping the legacy of the Wright Brothers alive.
And you said there are some family members in
There
the
are.
area that check in with you every now and then?
Yes, Stephen Wright, who is the great-grandnephew of the Wright Brothers, and then Amanda Wright Lane, who's the great-grandniece of the Wright Brothers.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for chatting with me.
My pleasure. Nice to meet you.
Yes, sir.
Enjoy your visit.
Oh, I am, I can assure you. So I'm just off West 3rd Street in downtown Dayton. I can't even begin to fathom all the history that went down here. The building you see behind me on the second floor, the brick building, the Wright brothers in the 1890s had a print shop there. It's now attached to the Dayton Aviation Heritage National Historic Park. Great interpretive center inside. You really need to check it out. They eventually moved to this building, the Wright Cycle Company. They had their cycle shop on the bottom. It was actually their fourth cycle company, an original building, and they moved their print shop up top on the second floor, one shop stop for the Wright brothers. But it was here they moved in 1895, and that's when they really started noodling around this idea of powered man flight. They had been thinking about it, but now they were getting more and more serious. Before they moved to their final and fifth location, their fifth cycle shop in Dayton, Ohio at 1127 West 3rd Street, just across the street here. We're going to go check out that site next. Unfortunately, the building's gone. Henry Ford gobbled it up in 1936 and moved it to Greenfield Village. But it all happened here. Their home is just down the way on Hawthorne Street. They could walk to work. Just fascinating, the history that happened here. Hanging out on the west side of downtown Dayton. It's actually really, really cool and very well preserved, I might add. Check that out. Buildings dating back to before the turn of the century. This is where the Wright brothers roamed. This is the area they had their bicycle shops in, and their home is nearby. They were no doubt in a lot of these buildings that existed back in the turn of the century. But 1127 West 3rd Street, their fifth and final bicycle shop, it was here that they built the flying machine that got off the ground for 120 feet at Kitty Hawk in December of 1903. The building is long gone. Henry Ford took it apart in 1936 and moved it to the Greenfield Village. You saw that in my last video, but what Dayton wouldn't give to have the bicycle shop that made the first airplane here back in Dayton, Ohio. But this is where it once was. Very cool. Welcome to Huffman Prairie. Miles and miles of cow pasture out just northeast of Dayton, but it was here in these fields where the Wright brothers learned how to perfect controlled powered man flight. It's here where they first learned how to bank their airplanes, turn circles, go in figure eights. This is where they figured it out in 1904 and 1905. They made 105 flights in 1904 and 50 more in 1905. You see the replica of the hangar. That's exactly where it was, and that's exactly what it looked like. And they actually used a wooden rail to catapult the thing off and launch it. They would drop a 1,600-pound weight from that. And as that would drop, it would launch the plane down the wooden track, launch it up into the air, and away they'd go. But it all happened here. This is where they perfected it.
Isn't it astonishing that all these secrets have been preserved for so many years just so that we could discover them? Orville Wright.
I can certainly see why they chose Huffman Prairie. It's always windy out here, helps give the plane lift. To put it all in perspective, when the Wright brothers flew their first flight at Kitty Hawk in 1903, just 24 years later, Charles Lindbergh, 1927, would make his transatlantic flight, first ever. And just 65 years removed from that Kitty Hawk flight in 1903, there would be a man on the moon. But it all happened here on the peaceful prairies, Huffman Prairie, in Dayton, Ohio. This is so cool. I love it.
It started with an idea held up by 100% faith in themselves, that with hard work, the pursuit of knowledge, focus, and unwavering determination, they could revolutionize the world. And of course, they did. For their fame and fortune, they suffered mightily. Orville crashing at Fort Myer outside D.C. in 1908. His passenger was killed, the first passenger fatality in aviation history. Orville himself was badly broken. His sister Catherine stayed by his side for months while he healed. From there, he hobbled around on a cane and usually in pain for the rest of his days. Wilbur spent his final years representing the brothers in court, protecting their patents they had worked so hard to invent. They eventually and rightfully secured all their patents, but Wilbur didn't live to see it. Some say the pressure of it all took his life. He died in his room at 7 Hawthorne Street in 1912 in Dayton, Ohio. He was just 45. A memorial was soon erected in his honor and for Orville, too.
Up on a big hill at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, this is where the memorial overlooks Huffman Field, where they perfected the flying machine. It's beautiful up here. And of course the memorial in the background. The Wright brothers are buried here in Dayton, Ohio at Woodland Cemetery. They're up on a hill. It's an absolutely beautiful place. You see their stone just behind me. Wilbur Wright, the older of the two, after a battle with typhoid fever, died in May of 1912. I don't know that another human accomplished more over their life than Wilbur Wright did. He never got to move up into that fancy mansion up on Hawthorne Hill, nor did he ever get to see what his great flying machines would ultimately become. But his younger brother, Orville Wright, did get a taste of all that. Orville lived a pretty long life up through 1948, so Orville did get to witness those great fighter pilots of World War I and World War II. We can only wonder what he thought about all that. This almost seems like an ending, but it's really not. Not for the Wright brothers anyway. Not as long as humans venture out into the wild blue yonder and beyond. The Wright brothers will indeed live on. For the History Mystery Man, I'm Don Ray the Ball. We'll see you next time.